my presentation on comprehension. So first and foremost, what is comprehension? We like to think of this as the essence of reading. So comprehension is the process of constructing meaning through interactions with literary or informational text. Comprehension is an exchange between the reader and the written word or the message of the text that the reader is interacting with. There are three main elements of comprehension. So obviously the first element would be the text. So what exactly is the reader reading? The second element is the reader themselves, and then everything that the reader brings to the process of reading. And then the third element would be the activity or the task. So this includes the purpose, process, and outcome. So why are we reading the specific text? How are we reading it? Like, what's the process? And then what's the outcome? What are we supposed to be gaining from this specific text? And across all these elements, we have cultural context kind of guiding how the reader interacts with the text and how the reader completes the activity or task based on the experiences and prior knowledge that they bring to the table. So when we think of comprehension, we think of some competencies that the reader builds upon in order to gain meaning from the written word. So some of these competencies include reading fluency, vocabulary, word knowledge, comprehension strategies, which we'll talk about in a bit, and just general motivation. How motivated is the reader to read? And all of these things, as each of these items improves, then comprehension as a whole improves for the reader. It's also important to just be reminded of Scarborough's reading rope. When we think about comprehension, we think about this idea of language comprehension plus word recognition, getting us to a point where we're able to access meaning and take meaning from what we're reading. So if we're thinking about the reading competencies that I just discussed, all of these things combined lead to a deeper understanding of the written word that we're reading. What do good readers do? So there are three kind of stages to reading. And if we're good readers, then we're in some way, shape, or form interacting with each of these stages in different ways, depending on the task or the type of text that we're reading. But before reading, good readers are goal setting. What are we going to be trying to gain from this written word? What kind of outcomes are we trying to get to after reading? So before reading, we're going to set some goals. We're going to get familiar with the text, take a look at the headings, and just the structure of the text. Start activating that prior knowledge depending on what the topic is or depending on what type of text we're interacting with, whether it be literary or informational. We might skim also to get familiar or to activate that prior knowledge. And we're going to start choosing some strategies that make the most sense based on our reading task. So during reading, we're going to, the reader who's a good reader is going to really try hard to focus and maintain engagement. And throughout, kind of monitor understanding. Am I understanding what I'm reading? Am I not? If I'm not, then we're going to go to some strategies that we have, which could include rereading, skimming, annotating, or answering questions along the way that help us get to some meaning. And lastly, we're going to evaluate what we're reading. After reading, we may need to clarify some things. So we may need to reread for more specific purpose or for clarification. We may need to summarize what we're reading in order to get kind of the full scope of what we're trying to achieve with this task. We're going to think about how to use the information that we learned, and maybe this leads to seeking more information or more engagement or more interest built. Throughout kind of the reading process, whether it's before, during, or after, we are using some metacognitive skills. So this idea of metacognition is thinking about thinking, and this is a really important task for readers of any age to engage in while they're reading in order to really understand the text that they're reading. So metacognitive knowledge is a student's awareness of how they're thinking and learning as they work. So, am I understanding what I'm reading? Am I confused? Am I paying attention? Those types of things as they're reading. And metacognitive control, which would be students' ability to self-regulate and adapt their approach in order to accomplish a task. So if we're kind of understanding that we're lost halfway through a paragraph, we're going to stop, pause, figure out a different approach in order to comprehend what we're reading, maybe go back, maybe ask some questions, maybe revisit some notes. But that's kind of like assessing our understanding and then adjusting our approach. And metacognition is really a foundational element of comprehension. All good readers engage in some metacognition as they're reading. So if we're thinking about explicit instruction to bolster or improve comprehension, we're going to think about really explicitly teaching some of these strategies. So again, comprehension is more of a byproduct of language and word recognition, but there are a lot of really explicit strategies that we can be teaching our students as they're reading to support comprehension and to strengthen their comprehension skills. So similar to what we were just talking about with metacognition, one of the strategies that's really important is just to monitor comprehension as students are reading. So giving them strategies to really stay in tune with whether they're understanding or whether they need to go back and reread or do a think aloud or discuss with a peer halfway. Those are all kind of comprehension strategies around monitoring understanding. Students also may connect to world knowledge. So how does what I'm reading connect to what I already know? And how can that help me understand more? Or maybe that's confusing and maybe I need to do something extra to kind of connect the knowledge that I have with what I'm learning. Another strategy would be predicting. So thinking about activating prior knowledge, what do you already know, and making some predictions about what the text may be. Another strategy is recognizing text structure. So do I understand the structures? Do I understand the elements of the story? Do I understand this particular informational text and how it's presenting information? Another comprehension strategy that's really important is asking questions, right? So as a reader, kind of asking questions to activate some, further dialogue with the text to gain some more meaning. So do I understand what I'm reading? Do I not understand? What are some questions I can ask in order to gain understanding? Who can I ask? How can I find further information to help me really truly comprehend what I'm reading? The next strategy, which is similar, is answering questions. So teachers often will give guided questions or, some activating questions that students are supposed to be answering in order to improve their comprehension of a topic or a story concept or any kind of literary idea. Constructing mental images is a really great comprehension strategy where students can kind of visualize in their mind and walk through what they're seeing in their mind as they're reading. And this is a really great tool to kind of facilitate the awareness of metacognition and what is your mind doing as you're reading. Are you building that visual picture of the characters and the story? And that all helps you understand the text more. And then lastly, summarizing. Summarizing is a great comprehension strategy. Obviously, just the recall aspect and really just kind of like reworking the story in a way that helps the reader understand. So when we're thinking about assessment with regard to comprehension, it's a little bit trickier than previous kind of sub-skills of reading, because comprehension is more nuanced. There are a lot of components to comprehension, and a traditional assessment alone is not going to be sufficient to tell a teacher whether or not a student has use of good comprehension strategies, can employ metacognition, is truly understanding the text that they're reading, and which kind of text, right? Some assessments may touch on the literary topics, but not maybe the informational topics. So alongside some of those traditional assessments like the Dibbles or, more mainstream standardized tests, teachers really need to be relying on ongoing informal teacher assessments, observations, using context of how like the student interacts with language and conversations and topics in class to really get some better information about whether or not they're comprehending what they're reading. So some useful tools could include just simple retellings. This is a really good way to determine whether or not a student understands what they're reading and understands the main ideas or the main, concepts well. Also, the student think alouds, where a student is asked to read and then kind of talk through maybe a series of questions or topics. This is a really good insight into how their brain's working and how well they're understanding what they're reading. And then some dialogic reading tasks, which, kind of touches on every aspect of, and this is really good with the younger kids, every aspect of comprehension, answering those WH questions, some open-ended questions, touching on recall, asking students to complete kind of simple thoughts or ideas related to the text. This is a good way to tell whether or not there's some comprehension happening. And lastly, the QAR, question answer relationships, works in kind of across all grade areas. So comprehension and multilingual learners is a really important topic because in previous presentations, I've talked about how vocabulary is so crucial for our multilingual learners, and comprehension really is heavily impacted by, oral language skills and vocabulary. So those are closely related. So teachers should be intentional about, again, promoting vocabulary acquisition and just oral language production in their instruction, so that students who don't speak English as a first language are, accessing prior knowledge and accessing vocabulary in a way that's going to help them understand what they're reading. And again, like as with all students, not just our multilingual learners, comprehension instruction should be explicit, must actively engage students in using metacognitive strategies while reading. And, multilingual learners should be encouraged to transfer comprehension strategies that they use with their native language to their, English-speaking tasks. So we're going to try out an activity that may be familiar to you because it's one that's pretty commonly used, upper elementary all the way through probably early high school. It's a really great activity for the before reading process, and then it also connects to the after reading process. And that's a KWL procedure or a KWL chart. So we're going to try this together today with a topic of butterflies. So students will be asked to read a short passage about butterflies, or a teacher may read it aloud to the class. But in order to kind of activate prior knowledge and to jumpstart that metacognition, we're gonna ask students to share, what do you already know about butterflies, and what do you want to find out about butterflies? What's going to get your interest going and help you engage with this topic? We're going to read the passage together, and then we're going to come back together and talk about what we learned. So that's kind of the KWL format, and we're going to try this out together today. So I would ask my students, what do you already know about butterflies? And they may say, oh, well, butterflies are very colorful. And we may talk about all the different colors of butterflies to help them start getting some mental imagery going in their heads. And then some student may say butterflies start out as caterpillars. And then we may talk about, oh, what stories have we read about caterpillars? Very hungry caterpillar and all these other things that we could start using to activate that prior knowledge and to start get the juices flowing. And then what do we want to find out? So students may ask, how do butterflies become caterpillars? What's that process like? How long does it take? Can butterflies make more butterflies, right? This is when we, start thinking about like the intricacies of the life cycle, and students may get, curious about some of this stuff, and then we'll be able to hopefully answer some of our questions or some of the things that we want to learn after we read. So here is our short passage about the life of a butterfly, and I'll go ahead and read it out loud, and then we'll come back together and do the learned column in our KWL chart. So butterflies start out as eggs. After about 5 days, a butterfly egg hatches and comes out a tiny caterpillar. The caterpillar is very hungry when it comes out of the egg. It eats and grows very quickly. When the caterpillar is done growing, it sheds its skin and forms a chrysalis, which is also called a pupa. The chrysalis is brown or green so that it's camouflaged in nature. Inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar begins to change into a butterfly. This complete change is called metamorphosis. The change happens quickly. Soon, the chrysalis opens and an adult butterfly emerges. When the butterfly first comes out, its wings are damp, so it spreads them out to dry. Butterflies learn to fly quickly after their wings have dried. Then, an adult butterfly lays eggs, and the life cycle starts all over again. And then we have a little caption in our box that tells us maybe this is important information or an enrichment question that we can use for more thinking about the topic. And it says, like all cycles, the life cycle of a butterfly repeats itself over and over. Can you think of any other cycles? And then we would talk about the picture and the life cycle, and then maybe have the students think about the question that was asked. And then we would go back to our chart and we would talk about as a group, okay, some of the things in our want to find out column. Did we get the answers to any of our questions? Do we need more information still? And then we would move on to what did we learn? And students may say, caterpillars go through a change called metamorphosis and turn into butterflies. Butterflies lay eggs that hatch into caterpillars, right? So we've touched on some of our questions from before. We've learned some new things, and then we would give space for students to kind of just share anything else or discuss further anything else that we want to discuss based on the task or the purpose of the reading. So I want to thank you again for listening to my presentation today. Please take a minute to complete the exit ticket and think about some next steps where we can reflect on our current practice and think about how we can really, explicitly teach those comprehension strategies so that our students are better understanding what they read. Thank you.